Hey everybody, it's Jay, and today I wanted to talk about my Chiappa Rhino. Specifically, this is a 40DS with a 4-inch barrel. Normally, whenever I do videos, I kind of like to front load with features about the gun, specifications, then get into my experience, then talk about my opinion, and then why I ended up going with what I went with. Today, because we're talking about a Rhino, I'm going to talk about first why I ended up getting one of these. And first and foremost is because whenever I buy guns for range use primarily, with that as being my first consideration, I try to avoid guns that overlap each other considerably in function and feel. And it's really hard to get a different feeling revolver than a Rhino. It's very unconventional, and we'll talk about the ways that it makes that unconventional in a little bit. Also, is a bit of an aesthetic thing, because even though I know a lot of people think that these are ugly, I actually think that they look quite cool. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll probably catch on that I kind of am into, near future or futuristic looking firearms. And this is no exception. This has been showing up in video games and movies and stuff. This revolver, as I mentioned, has a 4-inch barrel. We're chambered in .357 Magnum. And also shoot .38 Special. You can see we've got some .38 Special snap caps loaded up here. The cylinder release is definitely different than any other revolver that I have. You push down, pull down on this lever here, releases, and then the cylinder swings out. The cylinder is hexagonal, which they said back in the day, and I don't know if there's another reason for this, but they said back in the day the cylinder was shaped that way to help with carry, so you could get into a pancake holster very easily without the cylinder sticking way out. I'm not sure if there's another reason for that, but that's what they used to say, at least as a marketing bullet point. We have fiber optic sights in the rear and in the front, which I find to be pretty good. I like having these different color sights. I like these a lot better than standard 3-dot sights, and I like them better than flat black rear and then a colored front. This one has an accessory rail on the bottom. The 60DS I know has a rail on the top. I'm not sure about the 50. There is a screw here that I assume would be for mounting some kind of rail system, but I don't know, and I didn't look that up before I started this video. Probably should have. So something to look into if you're wanting to run an optic. I like the sights a whole lot. They are fully adjustable, so I don't really have any plan on changing them out. The trigger is double action and single action on this version, and I'll get into how that feels when I start getting into my experience. And this came with a standard wood grip. I also got a small rubber grip for it. Unfortunately, no one makes a rubber grip that I could find in a larger size, and the small grip from the factory was too small. So I ended up with these Hogue, what they call so-called big butt grips that are basically very similar, nearly identical to the big butt grips I have on my 627 that came from Speed Bees, but this one is micarta instead of rubber. This gun in particular weighs about 1.9 pounds, so fairly light, very handy feeling in the hand, and overall with this grip, pretty comfortable. I did find the factory wood grip to be a little bit large for me, just a hair on the large size. This fits me just about perfect, as did the 627 similar style that I got. So of course the big feature set on this gun is the low bore axis. So conventionally revolvers the barrel will run up here, and all of the action will be up here and linked to your trigger and mainspring and all that as well. I have not actually torn down this gun. In fact, when you remove the grips, the frame is all just one solid piece. There's no internals exposed at all. But I'll flash up a picture so you can see what the internals look like. One thing to note, the cocking mechanism up here is not a hammer. You would think it's a hammer because that's typically a hammer on revolvers, but it's not. So when you cock it into single action, you see that the hammer, the cocking mechanism, just goes right forward again. But you can see we've got this little cocked indicator, this little red flag right here, up now. And you'll see whenever I pull the trigger, it drops. Likewise, in double action, that cocking mechanism does not move like it would on a traditional revolver. And that's again because basically the bulk of your fire control group and everything is all down here because your barrel and everything is all down here as well. This can be decocked. According to the manual, if the gun is cocked and you want to decock it, you hold the cocking mechanism back, pull the trigger, ease the hammer, the cocking mechanism, I'm going to keep saying hammer, forward, and then slowly let the trigger off. And that's the way the manual says to decock. On a traditional revolver with the barrel up here, it rides very high, lines up very high above your hand. So when you pull the trigger, the force is going to go basically over the top of your hand and push the gun up, giving you more muzzle flip. But what the solution that the Rhino has come up with is putting the barrel very low so that whenever the gun goes off, it pushes it straight back into your hand and into your wrist and arm. So in essence, you don't really get reduced recoil, you just get redirected recoil into the stronger part of your hand. But I wanted to see if that actually worked. So I took it out and shot it side by side with my Model 627. Now again, my Model 627 has a 5-inch barrel. It weighs nearly a pound heavier than this Rhino does, so it's not an apples to apples comparison. The first couple shots you will see are with full power 357 Magnum. This is 158 grain hollow points. They're made by Fiocchi. They seem to be pretty punchy to me. There's quite a bit of concussion, quite a bit of recoil, so I think that these are fairly hot loads. The 40DS does not seem to flip the muzzle up nearly as much. I still have some climb. I definitely still feel the recoil, but it doesn't seem to push it up nearly as much. I kind of was thinking maybe I wasn't giving the 627 a fair shake and decided to really wrench down on that gun, basically hold my arm as straight as I could and maybe even a little bit high, lock my shoulder down and really focus on keeping the sights low. And I was able to do that one time, and this clip that you'll see is the result of that. Now there's only one clip, and the reason there's only one clip is because I did the same thing 4 other times, and all of the other 4 looked like the first ones that you saw where the muzzle actually flipped quite a bit. So my shooting experience with this has actually been pretty positive. I believe, really honestly, it does what it says it will do. Now, the recoil impulse does push more into your wrist and your arm and elbow, so shooting full power 357s, if you have weaker wrists or weaker arms, you're still getting that recoil straight back. It is still a bit of a jarring recoil experience. It's not, like I said, the recoil doesn't just magically disappear because this barrel is low. It still goes somewhere, and that somewhere is into your hand and arm and wrist. But it is easier to keep the sights on target with this gun, even with it being considerably lighter and with a shorter barrel, which again, I'm saying just because it adds or it takes away some of that weight. So I think a better comparison to make would be something like a lighter conventional top barrel revolver, because something lighter, you're going to feel that snap a lot more than like on my 627, because my 627 is deliberately pretty heavy. It's on there in frame. So I think you'd probably get a little bit more of an accurate comparison, and that's where I think that this gun would shine versus a conventional revolver, would be something that's more in the equivalent weight class. Now, from a trigger standpoint, the trigger on this is not great. The double action is very heavy. My trigger scale weighs out at 10 pounds, and this greatly exceeds that. But one thing that I will say is, shooting in double action, the trigger is very straight back. You may be able to see that. It doesn't actually have much sweeping movement. So that very straight pullback means that even though the trigger is pretty heavy in double action, my sights really don't move all that much. In fact, I find this gun to be easier to keep on target than any of my other revolvers, even though the trigger is heavier than most of my other revolvers. And I think that is because of, for one, the very high grip angle, and two, that very straight back, very evenly distributed weight on the trigger. The single action, however, consistently weighed just under 3.5 pounds for me. So single action is pretty good. I really do like the feel of the trigger. It's got this really wide, smooth bow, and it's just very comfortable. And that's kind of been my general experience with this, is even running with these micarta grips, this is a very, very comfortable gun to shoot. It has a very lively, very handy feel in the hand. And honestly, I would very easily use this as a go-to gun because it is quite easy to keep on target, and it's easy. It's just very easy to shoot. One note, because I know someone will ask, it is cut for moon clips. I don't use moon clips, but they include some in the box. Like I said, they normally include a conventional wood grip with this, and then manual, and a nice little fitted carry case and all that as extras. Accessories are a little bit harder to find for this. The grip options are much more limited than on pretty much probably any Smith & Wesson that's currently made, or Ruger's for that matter. So you're pretty well stuck in terms of aftermarket accessories with what you can get from Chiappa, and then a limited amount of aftermarket products. I was able to get some speed loaders from 5 Star, but they normally offer different configurations of their little preloaded loader here. This is what they call their bedside kit. They only offered the 2-cylinder version. One other call out that I've noticed, I typically do the Jerry Michalik method for opening and closing the cylinder and reloading on revolvers. There are a few things that makes that a little bit more difficult with this particular setup. One thing that I know that a lot of competition shooters will do is bring their hand around here, open the cylinder, turn the gun over, and then eject with their on hand, reload with their speed loader, and then close the cylinder. What I have found, though, is if you do that, you may notice that my hand is right on top of the forcing cone on the barrel. And in my experience, that gets hot real fast. So if you're going to do that, chances are you're going to have to basically relearn how to reload in that way. What I typically do, one other issue too with doing that is Jerry Michalik says to wrap your hand around around the frame. Put your hand as high as it can go on the cylinder and then push down and let it roll out. But if you'll notice, there is a lot of extra distance between here and that cylinder, at least for me, and I don't have the biggest hands, so it's a little more challenging to do. I found the easiest thing to do for me, and I'm not saying this is the best way, but the easiest thing for me to do is use my trigger finger and then push it, over and down, same way, but with a different finger. Let it roll into the hand, then do all my reloading with my offhand, and then close the cylinder. So, and that's the reason is because if I'm doing it conventionally, I have to bring my hand all the way around to get high enough on the cylinder to get a good push out on that cylinder. So I find that the easiest thing to do for me is bring it up and use my trigger finger to push it out. Again, I'm not saying that's the best way to do it or the right way. That's just the way that I found works easiest for me. So yeah, I'm overall very pleased with the gun. Been a lot of fun to shoot, much more than I was expecting. I honestly kind of figured I'd get it, play with it for a bit and go, yeah, I mean, it kind of does the reducing the muzzle flip thing, but not enough to make it something different from the 627, and I'll end up shooting the 627. But I actually find this to be really a lot of fun. And again, I think that goes back to just how kind of light and handy it feels, and then it really does do what it says to do. It doesn't have a lot of that flip, so it's pretty easy to shoot even with pretty powerful ammo. This is Jay. Hope you liked the video. Please click like if you did. Be sure to check out our backlog and subscribe to us if you haven't already, and check out the link to our Patreon page if you're interested in helping support us. And we will see you again soon next time.